Hello, friends. Hello, friends. A tradition unlike any other.
Oh, my goodness. In your life, have you seen anything like that?
There it is! Adam Scott, a life changer. Mashed potato!
Here it comes.
This is the 19th Tee podcast. Kieran Marsh, Nathan Drudy joining you in the afterglow of the third men's major of 2023. Wyndham Clark is the champion of the 123rd US Open from the North Course at the Los Angeles Country Club. In doing so, secures his maiden major championship title. Drew, so I'm expecting a lot from you this evening because you didn't give us much on your 54-hole thoughts. I'm sure that you're about to go berserk this evening with opinions and thoughts, but off the top, Wyndham Clark adds his name to an historic register of US Open winners.
That he does, and at the top there, that's what you heard was the Oregon fight song. So I couldn't help myself when you hand over the creative licenses to the editing process. That's what you get. You get the Oregon fight song at the top. So
you've dressed appropriately this evening as well. The Oregon jumper, the Oregon hat. If it's losing some sort of context for our listeners and you weren't tuned into key moments of the broadcast across the last 4 days, Wyndham Clark is an alum of the Oregon University, as is my co-host and good friend, Nathan Drudy. He does have, ironically, the distinct, unique quality of being an alum of both Oklahoma State, which was the college of his playing partner in the final round, Ricky Fowler, and the University of Oregon. But I suppose, Druds, as they say, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. Isn't that right? So yes. He transferred to Oregon, graduated from Oregon, and will always be a Duck. Question without notice. I'm going to go ahead. Well, I shouldn't because I get myself into trouble on this show when I assume. Is he the first Oregon Duck to win a men's US Open?
I would suggest so. I would suggest he's probably the first Oregon Duck to win a major. I would suggest. I can't think of too many others. I mean, look, it's a fantastic school, but it's not known for its producing of golfers. Aaron Wise is another one that's on the tour at the moment. So if you give me some time, perhaps, maybe what I can do is Google that, and then I will come back to you if that's best.
We can revisit it because there is a lot to unpack this evening. We will, of course, start with our champion, Wyndham Clark, but there's plenty to get through in terms of Rory McIlroy, another runner-up finish in a major championship. Ricky Fowler, and you'll appreciate, Druids, I've brought with me my emotional support water bottle, my Navy Yeti, going out in sympathy with Big Dick Rick. There's a bit to unpack there. Scotty Scheffler. Cameron Smith bucked his head, traditionally as he does on a Sunday at a major championship. So bit to unpack there, and not to mention plenty of opinions on the course itself, as we had flagged in the preview show. So a lot to get through, Druids, in our traditional review, but we'll start with our champion. I mentioned he wins his maiden major championship. I want to call it back to a stat that I produced as part of the preview show. Leading into this weekend, I mentioned that 17 of the past 23 winners of the men's US Open were in fact also maiden major champions. We can add another one to the list. It's not necessarily the person we thought would be lifting the trophy at the end of the day when we started it, given the names that were around him. But as is always the case, sport doesn't often, I suppose, bow to fairy tales. It often bows to just who's the best in the arena at the moment. And there's little doubt, if any, in my mind, that Wyndham Clark was the best golfer over 18 holes today when it counted.
I think you could make a case to say that he was the best golfer across 72 holes. I mean, for 54 of it, you could argue that Ricky Fowler was. But unfortunately, he didn't show up today. And I mean, look, from the very top, I think this is an unexpected winner. There is no doubt. I think he was about 100 to 1 to win it at the start. He hasn't really, his best finish in a major prior to this was T76 at last year's Open Championship. He's missed 4 cuts prior to this. But, had certainly been playing some nice golf. There's no doubt. Of course, the winner of the Wells Fargo, and he'd finished inside the top 5 at the Valspar and top 10 at the Phoenix Open. So there'd certainly been some good performances from Wyndham Clark, but there's no doubt that this is an unexpected victory for I think the golfing world. And I think today what really stood out to me about Wyndham Clark was that he had guys that are arguably better golfers and more well known and have a stronger stage presence. And I'm talking of the likes of McIlroy, Scheffler. I mean, Cam Smith was kind of around the mark for a little bit, and Ricky Fowler. I think for Wyndham Clark to stand up under that sort of pressure and to go head to head and come out on top of those guys is probably the most interesting and impressive thing to me. And I think I would still say that if that was a regulation PGA Tour event, it just so happens that this was a major that he went and did that. So yeah, there's a lot to like about what Wyndham Clark went out and did and took advantage of day one and put a really good score on the board. And often we see guys go out and put very good scores on the board and then eject themselves, and saw that similarly with Xander Schauffele. So yeah, I must admit I'm still probably wrapping my head around Wyndham Clark winning the US Open, if that makes sense, because it is very, very unexpected.
Yeah, not wrong. I'm glad you mentioned a few things there. The first of which was the previous performances at majors. We like to say that past performance is not an indicator of future performance, but there's only 4 of these a year. So more often than not, you do look to probably first and foremost performances at this specific major. And then if there's no form line there, it's across the board at how do you play when the lights are shining brightest. And to your point, has only made the cut twice in majors prior to this weekend, and 2 finishes in the mid-70s at those 2 events where he played Saturday and Sunday. So that's important context when you consider a person who stepped up and won. It's also important context that at 32nd, I think, was his world ranking heading into this weekend. This week. He's the lowest ranked player from an OWGR perspective to win a major since Graham McDowell, who I think won his major back in 2010. I did have that stat in front of me a moment ago. I'm just scrambling to find it now. But as I said, 32nd heading into this week in the world, only having won his first tournament at the Wells Fargo, as you mentioned. And yeah, he's the 37th ranked player was Graham McDowell back when he won the US Open in 2010. So he's kind of jumped out. I said to you, I believe that there'd not been a previous champion at the US Open outside the top 30 in something like 7 or 8 years. So again, bucked a trend for this tournament specifically. But the one that I wanted to mention to you was specifically around how we approached today. So unexpected in the sense, more so probably the names around him, I think would be fair to say. Take nothing away from the golf that Wyndham Clark's been playing, because coming into this week, he'd finished in the top 6 4 of his last 8 outings, including the win at Quail Hollow in the Wells Fargo. Of that group, I think everyone kind of said, right, he'll fall away and it'll be between probably Ricky and Rory. And if anyone's going to challenge, it's Scotty Scheffler. Of that group, he was the most recent winner. And on form, 4 top 6s in his last 8 outings, the best coming in to this tournament. So it's often the case, I wonder, where you've got a player like Wyndham Clark who we tend to, when it comes to the 4 major tournaments of the year, overlook the hot hand and defer to reputation. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing. I think it's all you've often got to go off, because you can't say this is the same as a regular PGA Tour stop. It's simply not. But I think that's what maybe underlines the significance of this victory even more, because we'll kind of walk through a few critical moments shortly, but just to do it in the face of those 3 around him that seemingly had, probably in that order, Ricky, Rory and Scotty, in terms of people from a golf fan perspective wanting them to win. You were the 4th out of 4 really heading into Sunday. You weathered that. You weathered an increasingly burnt out course. You weathered the pressure that comes with the final round in a major and holding a lead for the great majority of that round to be, crowned its champion. It's an incredibly incredibly impressive performance, by a guy who's breaking through for the first time at this level.
Undoubtedly. And some of the shots that he stepped up and hit, I thought were unbelievably impressive. Coming down the stretch, particularly, the wheels sort of wobbled there for a little moment on 15 and 16. It was getting a little bit dicey when making bogey on those holes. But the ability to kind of step up and get himself out of tricky positions when he needed to was phenomenal. The shot on 16, I think, was excellent, to kind of just scramble and make bogey so that it didn't end up turning into a big score. The shot on 14 was phenomenal between those two bunkers at the front. I'm just going back through the visuals here. So he was able to step up and deliver the shots when they were required. And I think that there's something in that it wasn't that he was so far ahead and faltered today, and it just so happened that he was a mile ahead that no one was going to catch him. He was able to deliver and honestly outplay McIlroy, Scheffler, Smith, Fowler around him, when, as you say, he was quite comfortably the fourth, and I think quite comfortably probably in terms of fan favourites, I'd say that he was quite comfortably the fourth as well. There was a great showing out there we'll get to that, but there wasn't a great showing out there. There was probably, in terms of who people wanted to win, it was Ricky and Rory and Scotty ahead of Wyndham Clark. So there's something in that for me, that he was able to stand up and deliver those shots when maybe people weren't necessarily backing him. But yeah, it's a truly impressive story, and obviously very emotional at the end. And his mum passed away from breast cancer while he was at college at OK State, and it was just such a I guess overflowing of emotion, and to see his interaction with Ricky after the press conference, and it just seemed like such a great experience for him, obviously, but also for those around him as well. They seemed genuinely happy. The likes of your Ricky Fowlers and the likes of your Scotty Scheffler seemed genuinely happy for him. So I think there's a little bit in that, in having such a popular winner. So yeah, I was looking through some stats, if I can just throw you a couple quick ones.
Please do. There's a couple that I had picked out, and I'm sure you'll be impressed with the fact that I even considered the data. So I'm happy for you to lead on the numbers.
Well, it's funny because I look at data golf, and then also the statistics on the US Open website. So the numbers for greens in regulation, right? This proved to be a really important figure. So despite Wyndham Clark finishing 49th in strokes gained approach, the actual data showed that if you were able to hit greens in regulation, you were finishing inside the top 20 of the tournament. So Rory McIlroy led the way at 82%. And then we start to get into the 70s. Minwoo Lee was at 74%. A couple of players at 72, Mitchell Morikawa and Tom Kim. Wyndham Clark was down at T9 at 69%, but no one outside the top T9, which is about 16 players, shot less than 69% to get on the green, which is very, very impressive. So getting on the green meant that you were able to score and get yourself into a top 20 position. So it was just an interesting point because it was kind of a little conflicting for Wyndham.
Well, can I suppose, only to illustrate again how impressive that victory is. 44th, as you mentioned, in the field strokes gained approach for the week. The previous 6 US Open winners were all 9th or better in that statistic for the week.
There you go.
Secondly, to illustrate that point, Rory McIlroy, I believe he hit 49 greens in regulation.
Right? There you go.
49 greens in regulation, which 59. I got
I've only got the percentages.
my primary number incorrect, and that would make more sense given your 80-something%. 59 greens in regulation. It's equal the most of any player in a US Open who did not win the tournament.
There you go.
So Clark's come from not necessarily the most advantageous position to scramble and ultimately win. And that comes from, there's a couple of stats here that I picked out, Druids. The first of which is around the green. Putting is fourth, he was putting. And off the tee, he was second. So driving the ball well, putting the ball well. Second off the tee, fourth around the green. That's courtesy of the US Open official page. Courtesy of the fried egg. This is I found fascinating. In a head-to-head with Rory McIlroy. So if you combine their strokes gained off the tee and their strokes gained approach, Wyndham Clark was gaining 5.85 strokes on the field. Rory McIlroy was gaining 13.58 strokes on the field, combined off the tee and approach. If you combine around the green and putting, Rory was gaining 2.46 strokes on the field. Wyndham Clark was gaining 11.9 strokes on the field, combination of around the green and putting. Yep. I think it tells the story. Like in isolation, he was excellent off the tee, second in the field, but he was second to Rory. But when it counted at the other end of the hole, every time he answered a question that Rory simply didn't have the answer to. And I think it's an important point. You kind of walk through the scorecard. He did a lot of things right today specifically. The scoring was comfortably, and this reflected across the week, easier on the front nine than it was on the back nine. And we'll come to a stat shortly that illustrates that. But he got out there and he scored. Birdies on 1, 4, and 6. The birdie on 6 was ridiculous from where he was in, shin-high grass just around that bunker at the face of the green on 6 to get up and down from there and ultimately birdie. He did drop shots on 2. Mind you, that's the same hole that Dustin had a quad on earlier in the week. 2 was taking some names throughout the week, and he bogeyed the par 5 8th, which he probably had entitled to drop more shots. Yeah, bogey was a good result there for him. But it was in the back nine, Druids. The up and down on the par 3 11th, playing longer than 290 yards in the final round, was incredible. The lag putt on 13 to secure a par, again, exceptional. That approach on 14 that you mentioned, I think he was the best part of 280 yards from the hole to take a fairway wood, thread the needle between 2 bunkers into a cradle and give himself 10 foot. That might be the shot of the week, to be honest. I know I had a couple of hole-in-ones, but that in and of itself, given degree of difficulty, might be the shot of the week. Couple of stumbles. And then again on 17, he made an error, left of the fairway. Got lucky, given where he was placed in how bad it could have been. But again, got up and down for par. And I think that's what it was. There were some exceptional shots like on 14 and the up and down on 6 to have the birdie, but it was more minimising the mistakes. And we kind of flagged that in the preview. The worse the course got over the 4 days, it was going to be about closing the gap between your best and worst. And that may be his best quality over the last 4 days.
It's interesting when you look at the total. This isn't strokes gained. This is the total number of putts per round. So per hole per round, and their correlation to where they finished on the leaderboard. So we're just talking about approach and now looking at the putting. It's very interesting because 3 out of the top 4 players finished inside the top 5. So the leader in the category was Smith, Fowler and Wyndham Clark were at T3, and Eric Cole was the other one who finished second, but he finished T39. You extrapolate that out, and it's actually interesting because the good putters didn't really feature at the top of the leaderboard. The finishing positions, T20, T32, T39, T32, T14, T43. So it was just the way in which Wyndham Clark went about saving shots and coupling that with his exceptional short game was something, he put together 4 very, very good days, and ultimately a really impressive performance today to not give away, too many shots and not really open the door to anyone. I know he only won by a stroke, but I never truly, truly felt that the door was wide open for anyone to come in. It seemed like he was in control for most of it. So, yeah, super impressive. No doubt that he's, this is going to give him an extraordinary level of confidence to go on from here. Where he goes, who knows? There's been many, many, many players who have won a major and then dropped off the face of the earth. But I don't know. You kind of get a sense that maybe Wyndham Clark's not like that, and he's going to be able to try and put this together, which would be great to see.
Leads neatly into a question I wanted to pose to you without notice. When you look at Wyndham Clark, do you see Gary Woodland or do you see Dustin Johnson? And for those who may not necessarily be familiar with the analogy, Gary Woodland, a one-time major winner, this major, in fact, the US Open. Dustin Johnson is amongst a long list of two-time major winners. But to your point, there are plenty of great players who've won one major. It's, I suppose, brilliant again to elevate yourself to two. Do you see, when you look at Wyndham Clark, do you see one or do you see maybe more, whether that's two? Acknowledging how difficult it is, acknowledging he got a course this week that probably leveled the playing field somewhat, and he kept his emotions and his game in check when those around him couldn't today. He caught lightning in a bottle, there's no doubt about that. But do you look at him and see Gary Woodland, or do you look at him and see the potential for more?
I think it's undoubtedly Gary Woodland. I don't see him as a multiple major winner. Happy to be proven wrong, of course. I also don't necessarily see him taking the trajectory that maybe Gary Woodland has, because realistically, Gary's faded off. He had a little flicker of hope there, but the light is, the dimmer is turned all the way down on Gary's career, unfortunately. Great Cobra man, but unfortunately the dimmer has turned all the way down. So I think it's Gary. As I said, I'll come back to that point. I am very happy obviously from an Oregon perspective that he won, but this was a very unexpected major winner in Wyndham Clark. So that's where I'll draw the line for Wyndham. So what else you got on him? You got much more? Because apart from playing the Oregon theme song again, I don't really have too much more to say on Wyndham. Just to maybe tie a bow neatly under that question, maybe a better comp would be someone like Webb Simpson, who is potentially
a one-time major winner and has gone on, despite not adding to his major victories, to have quite a successful PGA Tour career. And I see that for Wyndham Clark because I think week in, week out, knowing the types of courses that you get more often than not on the PGA Tour, I think his game is very sustainable for that model. He's long off the tee. He's relatively accurate with his irons, and he can catch a good week with his putter, like he did this week.
Yeah,
that's going to win. That's going to win a couple of tournaments. There's no doubt about that. And like he's had some starts. It's taken him, 130 odd starts to crack through for his first, and he's won his second 4 or 5 starts later. But more often than not, you'll be competitive with that well-rounded game on the PGA Tour. Whether or not it leads to another major victory remains to be seen. And looking at the schedule and the courses we're going to in the next few years, I think it's not. He's not going to get another course like this. Even Pinehurst next year is different again to LACC. I think this course really brought the field back, and still you had guys like McIlroy, Scheffler at the pointy end, but I think it leveled the field again. So take nothing away from what he did across these 4 days. He'll always be a US Open champion, and a deserved one. To your point, it wasn't about, I never felt like it was him regressing back to the field. I always felt like they were chasing him today, which is a credit to him, and I think reflective of the victory that he's had.
Yes, I totally agree. And I don't want it to sound like I'm not ecstatic that he won, because I truly am, right? I truly am pumped that he won. I just find it difficult to now start comparing him to courses that we've got coming up at both the PGA Championship and US Open level, because I think the sample size is too small for Wyndham Clark, right? He's won one major and had a pretty awful record otherwise, right? So I find it really difficult to start pulling that comp out too much further. So yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some great courses coming up, and he's a great player, so there's no doubt that he's going to be there or thereabouts. But, we're now 12 months away, essentially from another course that's really probably going to suit his game. Like, I don't think the Open Championship is really one on Wyndham Clark's list, but we will we'll have to wait and see on that.
Okay. Shall we work our way beyond our winner?
Sure, let's do it.
I think, obviously we go to our runner-up first.
Mm-hmm.
Rory McIlroy, again, features in a men's major championship. He obviously has won 4 of them. He now has 3 top 3s and 6 top 10s in the last couple of years in majors.
Yep.
It's agonizing, really, when you look at it. He, hand on heart, starting today, he's not the person I wanted to win, but I certainly wouldn't have been unhappy. He was your suggestion for the golfer that would not win, which this is an ideal situation for you. This is as good as it gets in terms of coming second without saluting. Not a similar question I think he needs to face to Ricky, which we'll get to in a moment, in terms of how many more looks will he get at it, because I do feel like the golf he's playing at the moment, there were times, I think particularly on Saturday, he looked completely at ease with his game. Even on the opening day, on the opening 9, he looked like all I could think of was what I had said to you in the preview. Is there any fear for you picking him not to win, that he could be completely liberated by the circumstances the last 2 or 3 weeks and come out there and blitz it? And he looked like that in the opening 9. I think it might have had a 30 on the front 9 on Thursday. Like, it was on. So yeah, the putter was absent today, in particular when you need it to be. And there's a couple of stats I wanted to run through on that front momentarily. But did you get at all caught up? Did you get at all fearful of where this may end up in terms of his selection of him not to win this tournament?
Well, look, I think fearful is probably the wrong word, because I said in that same preview that I would have been pumped for him to win, right? And that absolutely would have been the case. I think what I do want to get out in front of on this, and I did say that to you, that I don't have a great deal to talk about Rory other than what's been said, that we've said for the past 18 months, because his major record in his entire career has been outstanding, particularly in the last 18 months. I think he's finished inside the top 10 at every major bar this year's Masters in the last 18 months, essentially. So it's something like that. It's pretty close. 4 out of 5 or 6 out of 7. Very similar in terms of the way that he played in isolation. If you look at the way that he played, I felt there was some similarities to last year's Open Championship, where Cam Smith obviously went nuts and won. Wyndham Clark wasn't doing that. He was just playing steady golf and getting himself around and was just holding everyone at bay. But again, I think, like, I'm probably not at this point now, maybe having thought about it, to cast stones at Rory and go, well, he hasn't got it done again, he's mentally weak. And I think there's been a little bit of that narrative online. I think it's been probably an anti-Rory sentiment online, particularly if you're a live golf supporter. I think there was a lot of that today, that he was unable to close and blah, blah, blah. So you look across the event, the putter wasn't great. I think he finished about 29th, 30th for strokes gained, putting around the green. The short game wasn't great. And look, you pointed that out before, that it was almost the inverse of Wyndham Clark's, right? Like, off the tee and the approach game was fantastic, but it was on and around the green. He had a lot of putts that just missed today. We could be talking about a very different story if some of those putts fell. But, the saying goes, if my grandmother has wheels, she would have been a bike, right? So I'm just not here to cast stones, I don't think, anymore at Rory about finishing second, because I'll tell you what, there'd be so many players on the PGA Tour who would take Rory's record at majors. Take the wins away. I think it's as simple as that.
100%. So I can't disagree with anything you said. I also agree with the fact that there's little to add that hasn't already been said that we didn't say off the back of the Open Championship last year, that we haven't said. You know, I think the situation maybe at Augusta last year was different in the sense that he kind of came from the clouds. He hits a 63 on Sunday. He gets himself in the conversation, but
Backdoor
in
top
a
five.
round, in a round where there was absolutely zero pressure. I take your point in isolation. If you view the rounds between this and the Open Championship last year, they're similar. The scenario is obviously different. The fact that Cameron Smith hit 30 on the back nine at St Andrews and stole the tournament away. Rory needed things to drop from the get-go today, and he just never got going. There was four, this from Jamie Weir, who's the lead golf correspondent for Sky in the UK, one of my favourite follows on golf Twitter, and an absolute Rory homer, like just loves him. He's a Northern Irishman himself, and was riding every shot with as much emotion, if not more, than Rory himself. Made a really good point. The 4 holes around the turn for Rory, he had birdie putts from 4 foot on the 8th, 12 foot 6 inches on the 9th, 14 foot 8 inches on the 10th, and 18 foot 7 inches on the 11th. Now, best putt of 19 feet. It's not, impossible, but it's not likely. It's certainly a possible birdie, but those other 3, just inside 15 feet, just inside 12 and a half feet, and then a 4 foot birdie putt on 8, which he ultimately 3 putted today. If any of those drop, we're talking about a playoff. If 2 of those drop, we're talking about Rory McIlroy lifting his 5th major trophy. He 3 putts 8 today, as I mentioned. He 3 putted 13 yesterday. If that doesn't happen, he's probably lifting his 5th major tournament. He misjudged a wedge from 150 yards on 14.
Yeah, that was bad.
Into the face of a bunker. He ultimately got relief because the ball was embedded. But the shot then was a rubbish shot out of rough, trying to hold a fast green. And, he goes on. Did he par that hole? I'm just looking at his scorecard now. 14, he bogeyed. There you go. So that, that misjudged wedge, which is like, it's metronomic for him usually. 150 yards, wedge in hand. All he has to do is stick that. He pars that hole, Druids. We're into a playoff. There's just so many of these what ifs. I mentioned 59 greens in regulation, the equal most of any player at the US Open to not win the tournament. There was another stat here. Cumulatively across the 4 rounds, he was 271 strokes. It's the lowest 72 hole total in the history of the US Open by a player who has not won the tournament. It's crazy. And it's crazy to think this tournament and the Open Championship last year, we could be talking about him as a 6-time major champion. And where that elevates him to where I think you and I both undoubtedly believe he belongs in the conversation. To your point, he's certainly slid in the opinion of many. I was only having a conversation to one of my very good friends over the weekend who was actively riding against him winning this tournament. And that baffles me. It truly does. But I understand that sentiment is out there now. It was difficult because I do think he'll get more looks. I think that's the way the game is at the moment. Combination of where he's at and also the courses that we're going to. The likes of, Valhalla, I think Pinehurst sets up. I think Royal Liverpool sets up for him well in 32 days' time. So it's just one of those situations that in the fullness of time, I don't think he's won his last major. Not close. But whenever he calls time, it's inevitable that there will be a series of opportunities we'll look back on as what ifs. And I think that is will be the nature of his legacy. For as good as it will be, it will always, we will remember those moments where it just could have been a few more.
Yeah, I think you're right. Which is a funny way that the world works, isn't it? That we go,
yeah.
What if this happened? What if that happened? Instead of going, here's a guy who finished inside the top 10 at
Yeah.
more than 60% of the majors that he's played in, which is truly phenomenal. Which I think,
And
it's
he
about
was
that, right.
he was really good today. Like, he was asked about it. He was circumspect, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, I would rather be in this situation 100 more times for the opportunity to win one
Yes.
than never be in this situation again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's an enormously mature response. So fresh from, losing a major by one stroke. Yeah, he's all class. And
I
as
think
much
that's an
as I'm
important point, though. Like, I don't think. I mean, theoretically, statistically, looking at the leaderboard, yes, he lost by a stroke today, but I don't think he necessarily lost this tournament as much as perhaps what he may have lost the Open Championship last year, because Cam Smith went out. Cam Smith went out and dominated that last year, and at the time, we were Cam Smith went out and won this, and I think Wyndham Clark went out and won today. He only shot even par, but he did what he needed to do, and I think he held off Rory. He held him at bay, and sure, like all those narratives will continue for a long time. Well, they'll continue for 32 more days until we get to Royal Liverpool and he gets another opportunity. And for it could go completely belly out at Royal Liverpool, or he could be holding the trophy at the end. So I think
I'm just looking at his scorecard here. I mean, the story's in the front nine, right? That's the scoreable 9 this week, and he birdies the par 5 first, and then goes even through the next 8 holes. He's even on the round, having bogeyed the 14th, and he's even through the 3 par 5s the round today, which is, that's the story. So, yeah, he needed to score today, and unfortunately, as evidenced by those 4, birdie opportunities, it just wasn't there, unfortunately. So that's the story with Rory. But yeah, to your point, I've got no doubt we'll talk ourselves into it in roughly 27 days' time when we do the preview for Royal Liverpool.
We will. Scotty Scheffler?
Yeah, briefly, because I mean, we should do it chronologically, and he was my tip not to win the tournament. But we also should spend more time on Ricky than we do on Scotty Scheffler. So I'm conscious I want to temper this because I don't want to take anything away from Scotty Scheffler. Stumbled across a stat earlier today. His worst finish in his last 16 starts is T12. He's won twice, had 9 top 5s and 13 top 10s. We've had 3 major championships so far in 2023. He's been T10, T2, and outright 3rd. So the guy is on an all-time run tee to green. Ultimately one that I think will go relatively unrewarded given the level of quality golf he's playing at the moment, because I think we'll look back on this and we may see those 2 PGA Tour victories alone. And in the fullness of time, no one remembers the 2 things he won during the regular season. You remember the 4 tournaments of the year. He has an incredible ability to get really relevant really quick. Like, he was nowhere. And then he goes 3 under in the last 2 holes. Sorry, 3 under in the last 3 holes on Saturday with an eagle and a birdie. And all of a sudden, we've got people talking ourselves into him winning the tournament 5 strokes back or 4 strokes back. Quite incredible, really. And he deserves that reputation. He does. But much like Rory, it wasn't there today. The putts weren't dropping. He was a little bit more up and down from a scorecard perspective. I'm just pulling it up as we speak. It was a little bit more of a yo-yo than Rory, who had 1 birdie and 1 bogey. So 3 of each for Scheffler. But yeah, I never truly felt threatened. And ironically, what he needed today was putts to drop, and that's the very reason I said he wasn't going to win the tournament, because his putters failed him in the last probably 4 to 5 months. So, but God, he is so classy from tee to green.
Yeah, well, he was third today in strokes gained around the green, which
Hmm.
kept him in the tournament. For as much as he finished 3 strokes back, it kept him in the tournament because he was strokes gained approach 46th. And as you said, the putter didn't fire. I think to your point, I see him on a leaderboard now and go, okay, if he's on that little pop up in the right hand corner, he's in contention because he is a very quick scorer. And I think to a point that I raised a couple of weeks ago, he's now got that aura about him. Like he still seems like the nice guy, and I'm sure he is the big teddy bear, but he's now got an aura about him that commands respect. A little bit like Rory does, that the swagger kind of comes back a little bit when things are going well, and it's okay. Where's Scotty? You've just got to be having a little look over your left shoulder to see where he's coming. And yeah, he finishes only 3 strokes back, and a couple of those putts drop, and all of a sudden he's in a playoff or he's winning. So amazing major record that he's putting together. Amazing PGA Tour record that he's putting together. And let's not forget, this really only goes back just not even 18 months. His first win was at the Phoenix Open on the 13th of February 2022. So that's not even 18 months ago. And he has ascended so quickly, which is just, which is phenomenal that he's been able to do that. And in that time, he's won a Masters, obviously being the highlight. He's also won a Players' Championship, and let's not forget that his other wins aren't low-level tournaments. 2 of them are the Phoenix Open, one of them's the Arnold Palmer, and the other one's the WGC. So it's not like he's winning Mickey Mouse tournaments. It's a phenomenal rise, and yeah, I can talk in hyperbole around Scotty Scheffler for quite some time, but I think I'll reserve my time.
It would be remiss not to mention he got some absolutely disgusting relief on 7
He did,
today. It was technically deemed TIO, so temporary immovable object relief. He stuffed it behind a tree on 7, and I believe claimed TIO from a cable related to ShotLink that was on the course. Now, obviously, without being there in person at the LA Country Club and not understanding intimately how it was affixed to the ground, I would have thought a cable was the definition of a movable object. And he got a club length relief, got out, ultimately bogeyed that hole, which is, I think, it's a little bit of the golf gods shining down on us all. But I just, that one jarred a little for me. But a good tournament overall for Scotty Scheffler. Now, do we want to continue to go down chronologically, or do we want to go to Ricky Fowler?
No, I think go to Ricky, because I think I'm just going to say this before we get into it. I think he's arguably the biggest talking point out of the entire week, despite having a first-time major winner, despite having Rory go close, despite having Scotty have a decent crack. I think he's arguably the biggest talking point of the week. Okay.
Do you want to unpack that? I'm happy for you to walk us through that. I don't necessarily. I could see how you get there. I'm not sure if I agree entirely, but I can certainly see how you get there. So talk me through it.
Well, first and foremost, we're ticking off my roughie at $41 was Ricky Fowler.
We are.
So this is
excellent tipping from you.
This is good. One of only 2 guys to rank inside the top 25 across the 5 major strokes gained totals. The other one was actually Min Woo Lee. I think in terms of why I say I think he's one of the biggest talking points of the week, if not the biggest talking point of the week, was it's the rise, right? So he has been arguably, he has been in the wilderness for quite some time. There's been no doubt that he has been chipping away at his form returning over the past maybe 6 months. But this is a guy who has been so well loved by the fans, and B, makes the game so much better when he's playing well. I think when you talk about people who move the needle, to use a over fucking saturated term, he's absolutely one of those guys. So I think why I feel he's one of the biggest talking points was because he put himself in the conversation for 54 holes to go, I'm actually back. Like, this is, I'm now here again, because for so long everyone's been saying I'm not. And for 6 months I've been chipping away at it. And now this is it. I've finished T5 at a major. Sure, today was pretty average. There's no doubt about that. There is no doubt that today was average. You can't. I think, what did he shoot? 5 over or something like that today, wasn't it?
It's 5 over 75 today.
Like, shit house golf, Ricky. But I think in terms of one of the talking points to come out of it was that his ability to actually mix it with the big guns has been the knock for the past 6 months. While his form has been building, it's like, yeah, but it's not at the big tournaments. I haven't got his current results up just in front of me, so maybe I'll pull those up. But I just think that his ability to actually come out and show that he can mix it with the big players and not just be sort of contending in regular run-of-the-mill PGA Tour events is a really important step in the right direction for Ricky Fowler, stepping back into the octagon, I guess. That's how I got to the point of him being a massive talking point this week. Because for 54 holes, everyone was just on board. Everyone was dead keen for it. And it was really disappointing today, no doubt.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I think he would have been a wildly popular winner. It's because he's a wildly popular player for fans, a wildly popular person, seemingly amongst his peers. Look, I agree. I think the jump has certainly been obvious to those watching. We kind of called it out in the previous show when you picked him as your roughie. I ran through those rankings in all the major statistical categories. He's in or around the top 10 and everything that counts. Some of those having jumped from literally outside the top 150 in the world in those rankings as recently as last year. So it's been a stark improvement. He's gone back to Butch Harmon, his old swing coach, and that seems to have paid dividends. Immeasurably more mature. I thought it was telling. He spoke to the press for the better part of 30 minutes after his round on Saturday, where he bogeys the last hole, the 54th hole. When at that stage we all thought we were staring down the barrel of a Rory-Ricky pairing on Sunday. He bogeys the last hole, which was his only falter in that round. Like, that round was an even par 70, having shot a US Open record 62 on the first day, 68 on the second. He kept the wheels on the road on Saturday when a lot of people weren't, and that was what was necessary. Walks into the press conference, and the headline that came out of it was, Ricky says, "I'm not afraid to fail," which is now, don't get me wrong, there'll be people who say maybe he was a little too not afraid to fail, and that led to what we saw today, a 5 over 75, and the part of it kept him at the top of the leaderboard, completely departing him today. But I thought a guy who has won a Players' Championship, he's won 5 times in the PGA Tour, who's faced consistent scrutiny across his career without the ability to convert at a major championship, puts himself within a stroke of the lead going into Sunday, and gets up and says, "I'm not afraid to fail," and then leaves 30 minutes of press commitments and stays outside the tent for a further hour signing autographs. I mean, you don't have to go very far to understand why he's so well liked.
Oh, absolutely.
And sure, people might say, yeah, well, he doesn't have a major, and maybe he should spend more time on the range, or maybe he should not speak as often as he does to the media, or maybe he should do this, and maybe he should do that. Maybe he should, but at the end of the day, he'll have an enormous legacy irrespective of whether he gets this done. I'm not sure how many more looks he's going to get. This kind of felt like the week, to be honest, and I think LACC had a big part of that. Not to undervalue the way he's been playing recently, which has been exceptional, but this course really I think elevated his skills above a lot of other people. Ironically, I think he sets up well for the Open Championship, given the style of play at Royal Liverpool and where he's at. But, moving into some venues next year, I don't necessarily know that it'll give him a chance as much as the LACC did. But, yeah, I agree, Matt. I think to have him there was awesome. And to see him perform well was heartening. So I hope it's not the last time we see him in that situation, because he deserves that again, and probably deserves it in a place where it's a little bit warmer and more receptive. LACC didn't light it up with Ricky on fire through the first 3 days, and I think he deserves that time in the sun. But yeah, it was heartening to watch. I think
he's been
62 as well. Can I just say 62? Like, never been done before. You get 2 within 20 minutes on Thursday, but an 8 under 62 to start the tournament.
Huge,
awesome.
He's been remarkably consistent, and as I said, the knock that we've had is, okay, this is great, but we need to see it at the big tournaments. T13 at the Players this year was great. The Memorial finished in the top 10, finished in the top T6 at the Charles Schwab. I'm just looking, but miscut at the PGA Championship. So for him to come out and actually deliver a strong performance, I think is a massive indicator in the right direction, because there's elements of this. I could be talked into it, that there's elements of this resurgence to form that Jordan Spieth showed a couple of, maybe 18 months ago.
Sure. Absolutely.
The trajectory is what Jordan achieved prior is clearly far greater than what Ricky's achieved, but their stature within the game, and I think their popularity is probably not too dissimilar, really. There's huge Ricky fans out there. So for him to come back and deliver a great showing at a major championship, I think holds him in massively good stead. I'm probably a little bit more bullish than you. I think if he can continue some of this form, I don't see why he can't break through and win a Masters. Obviously, not a Masters, a major. Masters maybe does set up really well for him, but I think the first step in that is returning to the winner's circle, and he's got to do that soon, I think. So,
what I think you can guarantee is you'll be a part of the US Ryder Cup team come September, which, 12 months ago, you would have called me crazy for even suggesting that. I think they would be mad not to have him for a variety of different reasons, not least of which is the golf he's playing at the moment, but simply what he'll bring to that team. So I just also wanted to mention, if you'll indulge me for a moment, I thought it would be remiss not to say. So there was something I thought very, what's the word? Almost cosmic, for want of a better term, for his 62. His 62 on Thursday came on the birthday of the late Josh McIntosh. Who that name might ring a bell to a few people who are loyal listeners of this program. We first heard Josh's name in our very first interview with Louis Dobler, and then we were fortunate enough at the back end of 2021, and I actually looked it up before we came on tonight. It was the 25th of November, 2021, and if you'd like to go back and listen to the interview with Josh's older brother, Brad, who remains a good friend of this podcast and the reason why many of you on occasion take home Oakley sunglasses free of charge and giveaways. Josh suffered from an incredibly rare condition, which he tragically lost his battle to a few years ago. He was a former rep for Cobra Puma up here in Queensland. Got to know Ricky Fowler, introduced Louis Dobler to Ricky Fowler. The primary reason why Louis Dobler and Ricky Fowler maintain a relationship to this day. I thought there was something, just a nice connection to go out on what would have been Josh's birthday American time on Thursday and go and hit a 62. And there was a rather large part of me that would have liked to see him go on and win this week, in particular around Josh's birthday. I know Brad will be listening to this if he's made it through the better part of an hour. So I just thought that it was only appropriate that we mention that because it was a nice connection, a little bit of cosmic timing, and I'm fortunate to be playing back into this week in the Josh McIntosh Memorial Golf Day for a second time, Drude. So timing as well works there. I thought just wanted to mention that because it would be remiss of us not to raise that around such a great performance from Ricky.
Very well said, and hopefully you go better than you did last year and contribute a little bit more to the team and all those sort of things. I just want to say on Ricky, I reckon he's one of the only a couple of blokes who can pull off orange. God, he looks good in orange today.
He does.
I loved it. I loved it. That's all I'll say.
He does.
We've been going for an hour. We haven't even got to anything. So
I'll be wearing orange on Friday, and I won't look nearly as good in it as what Ricky did. So, ironically, we've actually also worked through three of our tips. Yes. Both of our won't wins in McElroy and Scheffler, and your Ruffy in Fowler. So we'll move now to the highest finishing Aussie, I think, is the next appropriate place to go. Mm-hmm. And I wrote in my thoughts, of course, we were in our traditional major exercise of sharing our thoughts after each day via the 19th Tee podcast channels. I wrote yesterday, Drudes, that this had all the hallmarks of a Sunday 65 from Cameron Smith. He got within two. He hit a Sunday 67, including two bogeys. So the 65 was there if he wanted it to finish outright fourth at 6 under, 4 strokes back. Took a little while for the broadcast to wake up to this. They didn't really latch onto him until the back nine when he ended up hitting a 3 under 32 on the back nine to get himself in the conversation. But there's something about Smithy, baked out courses, difficult conditions, stepping up when those around him are faltering. It was another exceptional major performance, his best at the US Open today.
It was the putter, fantastic. As I said, led that category across the 4 days. I think he was in the top 5 for strokes gained putting today. It's what we've come to know and love with his game. Obviously, he's a fantastic ball striker all round, but you return to that 2022 Open Championship where the putter was, again, phenomenal. Those putts that he made, particularly getting up and down on 17 on the road hole there and the ability to just sink putts from everywhere. It wasn't the same today, but there was elements of that the putter was on fire. So I think it's a matter of him putting together 4 days of all the required categories, and he'll no doubt be lifting a major trophy again. 6 under, in 3 of those shots coming today. I mean, you look at that third round and he was 1 over par, which I'm sure he'll kick himself for. But I think he again finishes inside the top 5 in a major, and I'm sure he'll walk away with his head fairly high and be pretty proud of his performance. As you said, the broadcast picked him up late. I mean, it's interesting because he did only finish 4 shots back, but I never truly felt like he was in contention. I'm not sure if that's sort of how you feel, but just kind of felt like he was almost playing to finish inside the top five, if that makes sense.
So his outright 4th is the best US Open result by a reigning Open champion since Tiger Woods in 2007, who finished in a tie for 2nd. So there's a neat little stat. It's also the 2nd consecutive major in which he's had his best finish. 9th at the PGA Championship was his best there. Solo 4th now, his best after a tied 4th previously at the US Open. So we're not seeing, unless you're tuning in where you can get it here in Australia, we're not seeing a great deal of Smithy week in, week out. We are seeing him still, save for his performance at the Masters this year, remain relevant at major championships. So that's good to see. We love him playing his best golf. It's always a very pretty thing to watch. So a good weekend from Smithy. Good place to mention Pultz. He goes by at Pultz, a loyal listener on Instagram. We of course ran the competition as we always do. For this major, it was named the highest finishing Australian, ironically with the lowest score. That would be closest to, without going over, Pultz hit it on the number.
Nailed it.
Cam Smith, 6 under.
Yep, just confirming that right now. So well done, Pultz.
Will take home his choice of, we've got 5 or 6 different pairs of Oakleys remaining, so his choice of a pair of Oakleys, thanks to our great friends at Oakley Australia, and a box of Callaway balls as well for his travels. So congratulations to Pultz. There were plenty of people, Drudes, who selected Minwoo Lee as their highest finishing Australian. and weren't all that far off because
No.
he finishes a stroke back at 5 under and a tie for fifth, alongside Ricky Fowler and alongside Tommy Fleetwood, who we'll get to in a moment. Minwoo Lee, his best finish at a major to date. He will be ruining, I would imagine, the 4 over 74 on Saturday because 3 rounds in the 60s otherwise looked really, really good. And I think I was having a conversation with a friend of mine earlier today. Obviously, he wrapped up temporary membership post the PGA Championship, so he now has unlimited sponsor exemptions on the PGA Tour between now and the end of the season. The focus will, of course, be locking up status for next year. On the current trajectory, I think that's well within his grasp. The way that he's playing, he has a game predicated on distance, striking his irons, and more times than not putting well. Occasionally that's what lets him down, but it's a very sustainable model from a PGA Tour perspective, and he goes from strength to strength. What was the stat that you said before? It was only he and
Tommy, he and Ricky Fowler, the only ones to finish across all the major strokes gained categories. Him and Ricky Fowler, the only ones to finish inside the top 25 across all.
There you
go.
go. I think that's reasonably good going from Minwoo. They would have been going berserk at Raw Fremantle, I would have thought, over the weekend, Dreads.
Yep.
Any further thoughts on our second best Aussie, Minwoo Lee?
No, I mean, I thought this course really set up well for him. I had him as my top finishing Australian. To your point, the putting, third in strokes gained putting today. Overall finishes 16th. But just he's on a fantastic trajectory. We know the talent, and yeah, for a fleeting moment there, I thought there was a chance, but unfortunately, that Saturday round really spat him out of contention. But nonetheless, T5, he'll be very proud of finishing that high to US Open.
Just want to briefly mention the other player that finished at T5, 5 under, Tommy Fleetwood, missed a 5-foot birdie putt on 18 today that would have secured a 62. The third 62 of the week, entering into this US Open. There'd never been a 62 previously. Ironically, he held one of the only other two. Well, I think there was one of 2 63s in US Open history previously. It was his final round at Shinnecock a couple of years ago, I think back in 2017, 2018. So he now owns 2 of the best 3 rounds in US Open history, 2 63s. Incredible from Fleetwood, catapults himself into a tie for 5th. And I think, given he came into this week losing a playoff at the Canadian Open, he plays this well here, and he's going back to the UK. Just little black booker, I think, for Royal Liverpool. Everyone will draw themselves into Rory McIlroy. Everyone will draw themselves into the usual suspects. I just think the way Fleetwood's playing at the moment, he was exceptional today with his 63, and just one to watch for the Open Championship in 32 days' time.
Yes, not too much more to add on that. Obviously, it's pretty disappointing sort of first 3 days for him all in all. Never really fired, but no doubt that today was truly phenomenal. I think he led most of the strokes gained statistics, as you'd expect.
Just one shot further back, and the only reason I want to mention Tom Kim is the fact that we were seemingly on 59 watch on Saturday. He was 29. 6 under 29 through the first 9 holes. He ultimately finished at 66 after a 2 over back 9. But I mean, that's an incredible finish. He's best at a major, T8. This kid's 20 years old. Like, I know we get a little bit probably carried away with what he did at Quail Hollow on the President's Cup, but he's won on the PGA Tour. He's now finished in the top 10 at a major. He's a special kid, I think, and he's got a lot ahead of him. The young Korean Tom Kim. Choo-choo. Tommy the Tank Engine.
Where do you want to go next? Should we just highlight some of these tips here? Because your want to win finished at T10, John Rahm.
He did 65 today, one of the best rounds out there. A couple of 65s, actually. Obviously, no round better than Tommy Fleetwood's 63. But scrolling down the leaderboard. Austin Eckroyd alongside John Rahm hit a 65, alongside a few others as well. So an impressive finish for Rahm. Ultimately, I think it was probably his, what's that, Friday, 3 over 73. Because outside of that, he is 6 under through the other 3 rounds. So that's the story. He finishes at 3 under, 7 shots back. Look, I think he was solid across this week without ever really being in contention, which disappointing by his standards. Certainly, what I and many other people who enjoy watching him play expect. But look, I don't necessarily think the LA Country Club was best for John Rahm. I think you walk away disappointed, but not completely empty of that result, given not a great course for John, I don't think.
Yeah. Interestingly, I actually thought it did set up well because he could shape the ball, and he's very, very good at that.
Sure.
But he, sorry, my apologies on the stat before. It was he can join Minwoo Lee and Ricky Fowler as finishing inside the top 25 in all major strokes gained stats. He snuck in 23rd in putting off the tee and 22nd around the green. So just sneaks in. But yeah, I mean, another top 10 for John Rahm at a major. I mean, he's a very, very good golfer. There's no doubt. I'm sure he would have loved to have been a little bit higher at the top. But yeah, top 10, John Rahm. Chalk it up.
Alongside him, and I'll only mention it briefly because I just think it's important for consistency to note, is there anything surer than Xander Schauffele not figuring in a major?
Yes.
And
Patrick,
I say
Patrick
that...
Cantlay not figuring.
True, and figured less than Xander, because at least Xander figured for a day. He was equal leader after the opening round. And I think I noted it in one of my reflections on one of the days that I'm as certain as I've ever been before that he will exit stage left at some point in the tournament. To his credit, he battled today. He's finished with that's a weird thing to say for a 72, but he really could have exited. 3 over cost him on Saturday, and then there were shades today where it could have got ugly, and he battled with a couple of impressive birdies, but yeah, never, ever, ever in contention, nor will he be. Anything else around there? I know we'll go to Colin Morikawa in a moment. Your winner.
Yes.
I think Dustin's worthy of a mention only because he's finished in the top 10 of a major despite a quadruple bogey. That's pretty impressive.
That is impressive. He's very
and
impressive.
The fact that I think he had a 64 on the opening round, and you had a stat there. What was he with the putter on the opening round?
Oh, it was.
It was in your notes from
5th strokes gained putting or something on day one
with a 64.
Yeah,
that's remarkable. Really.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
He's an enigma. That man. He's a genuine enigma.
Absolutely. Colin Morikawa.
Look, I'll let you lead because he was your selection. I'll let you kind of maybe talk through that, and I'll see where I find points of support.
Largely, I guess probably after the first round, I think was largely irrelevant, to be honest. I mean, I know he played nicely and shot under par in the next 3 days, but interestingly, finishes inside the top 30 for strokes gained putting, which was probably a stat that I thought may not have been the case upon seeing where he finished. The thing that got him was around the green, finished 44th for strokes gained. His approach was excellent, inside the top 10 again, and inside the top 20 off the tee and tee to green. So, yeah, it was, I think, all in all disappointing because his short game has generally not been the thing. And when I say short game, I mean chipping and around the green. That's not really been the thing that's kind of let him down. So, as I say, you can never put all the numbers of the abacus to one end and get it all to fire. But, yeah, pretty disappointing all in all. I know he finishes T14, but, yeah, after day one, I think I was probably kind of reserved myself to the fact that he wasn't going to win from there. I thought he was too far back straight up, even though I think he was only one over par.
Agreed. He was impressive for a patch today. He was 4 under through 5 holes from 6 to 10 today. Got red hot and then dropped 3 shots coming home.
Yeah.
So there was a point at which he was 5 under. And by your marker, popping up in the little graphic on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen there for a mere moment
Yes.
before he exited. But yeah, look, I agree. I maintain all the things I continue to say about him. I need to see something before I'll ever get excited again. He's truly one of the best players in the world when he's hitting the ball well. I just don't. I think it's remarkable to me that this same player that I'm watching now won 2 majors, because the hallmarks of that game I'm only seeing flashes of at the moment, and that was iron play and accuracy off the tee. It wasn't even predicated on a great putter because it was kind of up and down with the flat stick. But I'm only seeing flashes of that at the moment, and I think he's capable of so much more, which is what I find frustrating about him.
He's no doubt frustrating. I think the ball striking's still there. I mean, he finished in the top 10 again for strokes gained approach and hit the ball well. I think it is, to me, it's as simple as if the putter lights up, he's going to be good. He's going to win more times than he's going to lose. So, but that's a big if. It's all got to come together. But similarly for Victor Hovland, who you said was going to win and who was my want to win.
Yeah, look.
Talk me through this.
Disappointing here from Victor. 1 under on the first round, which when the leaders are at 8, sounds crazy to say he's not out of it, but he wasn't by any stretch of the imagination. If he jumps up and has a 67 on day 2 and gets himself to 4 under, then we're in the conversation again. But he went the other way, 70, 69, and then a 2 over 72 today to finish even par and outright 19th. Look, I think when you've got a player coming out with holes remaining in the tournament, I think it was after 54 holes, he had some thoughts on the course. Mentally, you're done. If you're out already in the press, get passing your opinions and your comments on the layout. There's no great holes out here. I think there's a few good holes, but nothing great. Like it's okay. Well, the course is inside your head, Victor, and you're not really doing much with the remainder of your week, and that's fine. That's your prerogative. A little disappointing given how you've been playing leading into this, but yeah, I just don't think you had it. Nor did the 2 that finished above him. 1 shot ahead in tie for 17th, the defending champion Matt Fitzpatrick and Brooks Koepka, both of whom also passed comment on the venue. Look, the course is doing its job. As soon as players start to complain about a US Open venue, it's ticked the box in terms of criteria, but also it automatically rules you out of being anywhere near contention if your focus post round is on complaining about the setup.
Yeah, interestingly with Victor Hovland, drove the ball really well. Just couldn't capitalise. 44th strokes gained approach, 6th off the tee. Putter was nowhere, 45th there. Weirdly, my knock against him being the short game, which I thought was going to be really important, and turned out it was. He finished 11th for strokes gained around the green, but just couldn't put the ball in the hole after that with the flat stick. So, yeah, disappointing for him to finish outright 19th. But yeah, I think he's still a very good player, and he'll win a major sooner rather than later, I would suggest. The only other tip that's left is your roughie, Sahith Theegala, which T27 km. Pretty good.
Look, I'm happy with that. For a $96 pop, I think he was. It's not your $41 man factoring for 80% of the tournament and then finishing in a tie for 5th. But, at $96, I think making the weekend and then, a top 30 finish, it's reasonably good for Sahith. He played a fair bit of golf at the course prior, which is kind of a large part of the reason. He's been playing well, not setting the house on fire so far this year, but he's played a fair bit and he's a California man. So that's kind of things that factored into my decision. Ultimately, the course proved, as it did for a lot of people, proved too much for him. But yeah, I was pretty happy with the tie for 27th for a $96 roughie, Drew, so I can't complain with that.
No, that's a very good pick. The Aussies?
I think so. Just briefly, probably before rounding out with some thoughts on the course itself. In terms of making the cut, it was Minwoo Lee and Cameron Smith, who've already covered. He's obviously not an Aussie, but kind of Russell Crowe adjacent. Ryan Fox, T43 for Foxy at 5 over.
Yes.
He was, if I'm looking here, he was 2 over, so kind of just made the cut Did well given the way the course was going to only drop another 3 strokes across the next 36 holes. So finishes in a tie for 43rd. That was Foxy. And then it gets pretty ugly, if I'm honest. I'm scrolling down. In terms of the Aussies who missed the cut, Lucas Herbert was the next best at 5 over, a 70, even past 70 to open, and then 75 on Friday to miss. Adam Scott also 5 over. He went 73, 72. Carl Phillips, the amateur from Stanford University, 9 over 74, 75 to miss the cut. Jason Day also 9 over 73, 76 on Friday was bad from J Day, considering where he's been. And then finally, Shrewds, this, honestly, I was aghast. He was my tip for the highest finishing Australian. Played very well at the PGA Championship to get himself into the top 5 on the final day. Cam Davis goes 72-79 to finish 11 over and missing the cut almost by 10 strokes through 36 holes. So that's pretty disappointing from Cam Davis, sorry.
Agreed. Do you have any other players that you just want to quickly pick out before we maybe spend 5 minutes on the course, KM? I've got a couple that's happy for you to go.
Only one for me, because we've obviously been talking for a fair while already. I don't think we need to go into any great depths on players who've missed the cut or not factored, but Justin Thomas.
Yes, he was one of mine as well.
14 over, a 73 and an 81, which I believe is his highest ever score registered in a PGA Tour round. There is something amiss there. A lot of suggestions without confirmed reports of an injury. The hip, it appears to be. Something is not right. That's a 2-time major champion and one of the best players in the world. And he is 14 over at a major. There's something going on. I just think it's worth watching, not only in the context of another major in 4 weeks' time, but he's a critical member of the US Ryder Cup team, and I wouldn't pick him on that form, to be honest. So, just one to watch.
No, totally agree. He was one of mine as well. The only other couple that I would just want to call out, a guy playing under the South African flag by the name of Aldrich Potgieter.
Your man. Yes.
Born in South Africa, but actually lives here in Western Australia, playing under the South African flag. The reason that I bring him up is because he not only made the cut, but he actually led the field in driving distance this week at an average of 336.2 yards. So he outdrove, coming in second was Minwoo Lee. So I guess maybe a little Aussie sort of...
little Perth connection, to be honest.
Yeah, a little quasi-Aussie 1-2 there. Beating out the likes Cam Young, DeChambeau, Rahm, Clark, McIlroy. So just a nod to Aldrich Potgieter there. Shout out Sam Bennett as well. I've got a lot of time for this guy. Disgusting little goatee that I think we need to maybe have some sort of...
He shaved it. I don't know if you saw that. He shaved it.
No, I didn't see that. I saw it on day one.
After 54 holes, he got rid of it. And I think he hit... Let's just double check what he hit today, because there are some suggestions that there could be some sort of Samson effect going on, because he shaved it after 54 holes, and I'm pretty sure he had a 9 over in the last round.
9 over yesterday, 1 over today. But take
scratch that. I think he shaved it after 36 holes. The day after he shaved it, he hit 9 over. So
take your point. He's going to be very good. T16 low amateur at the Masters, of course, was in contention for a fleeting moment there at the Masters. T43 at the US Open here, and he backed up last year's T49 at the US Open. So shout out to Sam Bennett. And just the other one that I'm just a little concerned about. Sorry,
just on Sam Bennett before you move on.
Yeah,
I agree with everything you've said. Has to address his pace of play.
Oh,
it's
totally.
There's a problem, and we are so early in this in terms of his career. He's going to factor. Clearly a good player. It's got to be. We've got to see some improvement, because it's. Minwoo was with him for a day, and you could tell it was starting to wear. So
No, totally agree. Same with Carlos Ortiz. I've never actually realized how slow his pre-shot routine is. Awful, which is a nice
Yeah.
segue into. I just want to mention Jordan Spieth. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just tricky at the moment. It's not looking great. I mean, he's only had two meaningful results in his last seven major championships. So I'm not putting him on notice. I just want to raise it because I'm a little nervy about Jordan at the minute. He missed the cut with a 3 over 72-71. I mean, definitely could have made the cut, but faltered with three bogeys in the last 6 holes on in the second round. So disappointing for Spieth, but I'm sure he'll bounce back.
Mm. I was just about to say, you watch him finish in the top 5 at the Travelers Championship this weekend. If he's playing it, you put some money on, it'll happen.
Give me your thoughts on the course. Give me a 5-minute sort of rundown because I'm conscious that we don't want to approach the 2-hour mark, but we do have to give our thoughts on the course because I mean it's been much maligned this week on social media. There's been a lot of chatter, both positive and negative, and I'm interested to see where you kind of land. I think I know, and I think we're probably in a similar boat, but I felt like the course always at a US Open gets so much attention, and maybe rightly so, but it almost became the focal point of the entire tournament, particularly after 2 opening 62s.
Correct. So I've got. Look, I think I hark back to what I said in the preview that I thought we would look back on ultimately the course as the greatest winner out of this tournament.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably soften on that a little.
Mm-hmm.
There's a variety of storylines which we've covered in great depth that I remember more than I remember the LA Country Club North course. I thought it was excellent though. I think I heard a really good analogy. It was Andy Johnson on the Shotgun Start podcast over the last 4 days around at some point in, I think it was the 1920s or 1930s, the identity of the US Open got hijacked. And it was the suggestion that it had to be the toughest test in golf.
Mm-hmm.
That was the cornerstone of what the US Open was. And the ludicrousy of suggesting that you can have the same identity when you change the golf course. Literally the only major championship that has the same identity is the Masters because it's played at the same place every year. And the analogy that Andy Johnson drew was like, it would be like bringing the 10 best chefs in the world into a room and telling them they all had to cook the same dish, irrespective of the dishes that are their signatures, irrespective of the styles that make them the chefs that they are. It's like you've all got to cook steak frites rather than you cook what you're best at and let me enjoy you going to work the way that you work and what makes you the genius that you are. Like, why is it that we think that the US Open has to look the same every year? Because I accept that 2 62s, when there's never been a 62 in the 122 years prior in this tournament, seems a little on the nose. I understand that. But in that same round, there were 75s, there were 76s. Aaron Wise hit an opening round 79 in the first round. What's that? That's a 18-shot, 17-shot dispersion. Like, it was there. Just because a couple of guys threaded the needle by virtue more so of the better side of the draw, really, than anything else. And we saw it as the conditions wore on and the course started to dry out. I thought they actually did an incredible job to keep it in line. Like, they could have really let it go and it could have got pretty silly, to be honest. It turned from genuine scoring opportunities to being happy with par.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, ultimately what, I don't know, like, personally, I find that more entertaining myself. But realistically, there were still opportunities there for someone like Rory or Ricky, or even Scotty Scheffler to go and put themselves in the conversation from 4 or 5 strokes back. It wasn't the 2006 US Open at Wingfoot when Jeff Ogilvy finished like 3 hours before Mickelson and Phil vomited on himself all the way through to the end. Like, I don't find that overly entertaining. I want to see the opportunity for someone to go and grab it if they can, or someone to maintain control like Wyndham Clark did through 18 holes to win. Personally, I find that much more entertaining, and I thought the course did a great job at doing that. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think we're not too dissimilar. I mean, I think the USGA made some forceful recommendations about the way the course should be set up in terms of taking rough out of particular areas. I think it was between 1 and 18. The rough was basically taken all the way down. I felt at times the bunkers weren't super relevant. There was a little bit of commentary on that on the television. Speaking of the commentary, Luke Elvey. Oh God, he grinds my gears. Like, just stop. I don't want to pull down a fellow Aussie, but God, I think just
he's basically Canadian at this point, to be honest.
Just talks too much. Anyway, look, this is my take on the course, and I actually enjoyed watching a new golf course. At the same time, I found it. I've got my notes here. There was a couple of contributing factors to why I found it hard to relate to it. I think it's because this is the first time that most, I would say 95% of the people watching that tournament have seen LA Country Club North Course host a PGA Tour event / major championship. So that
most anyone's seen it hosted.
Yeah, well, the last time was in the 50s. There wouldn't be too many people. So I found it really difficult to relate to it because I didn't know what I was looking for. Obviously, I'd researched it a little bit in the lead up. I knew a little bit about some of the holes. Obviously, knew 6 and 13 and some of the funkiness that was there. But I found it difficult, and that's on me because I didn't go out and learn about the course. I think the other part also was that it's not a course that's super accessible either, and neither is Riviera and neither is Augusta National, but we see them every year, so we understand what that course is meant to look like and how that course is meant to play. This was a genuine learning experience for 95% of the people who were watching this, myself included. So that's where I found it
probably 95% of the field that was playing it.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where I found it a little bit hard because I was like, hold on, I don't really understand this hole, if that makes sense. And that's true of most US Open venues. The conditions didn't massively help what they were trying to achieve. I think they were trying to trick it up a little bit more than maybe what it got to, but to your point, it maybe allowed some scoring. I reckon they probably wanted it to go a bit harder. They didn't get the wind and the hot conditions that they were hoping for. And I think the third thing for me was the vibe, right? To quote the Castle, the vibe was non-existent, right? It was such a poor showing in terms of turnout, and there are a lot of contributing factors in terms of the LACC members essentially took all the tickets or most of the tickets or whatever it was, and people couldn't go and get around it. And I think that's really disappointing for what is, in a lot of ways, the People's Open. You know, this is the way that you can qualify into this as a regular punter is truly phenomenal. So I think that was really disappointing. They're the 3 kind of key factors to me that I think perhaps dampened my personal experience of watching the course. I still walk away with it going, this is a fantastic golf course. Part of it's on me, part of it's on the LACC, and I kind of walk away largely neutral out of it, which is probably a little bit softer than your position because I think you probably still quite enjoy that golf course.
Yeah, I think where it comes back to for me, and I agree, the atmosphere was terrible. Like, realistically, I think some of the things we saw Even like probably the loudest it got might have been Scheffler's Hole Out Eagle on Saturday afternoon, and that wasn't that loud.
Yeah.
But things today, like Clark's approach on 14, I think in most other markets, New York, Boston, Chicago, to name a few, like crowds in those markets for US Opens would have appreciated that appropriately, that sort of golf. And I don't think we got that. For context, we're literally playing on a course that has houses including the Playboy Mansion, Lionel Richie's mansion, like backing onto holes. Like this is the context of where we are. The land is valued at $8 billion. So like don't lose sight of where this tournament was and how rare it is to be invited into a place like that for a major championship. So I think you've got to take it like it's kind of the atmosphere is the same as what I feel like I was saying before about the test can't be the same. It can't all be knee high rough and 8,500 yard courses every year and 25 meter fairways. Like it shouldn't be that because it would be boring, to be honest. And I'll take this over an Oak Hill that we had for the PGA Championship. I'll certainly fucking take it over Valhalla where we're going back to the PGA Championship next year. Pinehurst excites me again because it's a little bit different for the US Open next year, but it's just the unique nature of this. Like, there's so many holes. 3 was sick. 5 was sick. 6 was awesome. 8 was unreal. 11, 13, 15, like an 80-yard par 3 today at 15. That's just different. It's funky. We don't see it. And yeah, there were elements of it I wish were better. I wish we could have had 40,000 people in there as opposed to maybe 4.
Yeah.
But by the same token, they're not going back there anytime soon. It's the one thing I do like about the US Open is you will get these occasional courses that you're not going to see for another 40 years. So rather
16 years to the next one, 2039, we're back there.
Are we? Excellent. Oh, well, I'm not sure this podcast will still be going, but I'll be tuned in, eagerly because, I think I said at one of the reflections on one of the days, like, spare me your, this is not my, the popular phrase, this is not my grandfather's US Open. I don't care because the game has moved on. Like this, to my mind, ultimately elevated the best players this week. That's the only thing you should ask of a course and a venue that hosts a major championship. And if it has to do it in different ways because the game itself has evolved, then so be it. Also, Druids, can we just reflect on the fact that I called it? I said, let's wait and see the Venn diagram of the players who complain about this course, but also don't want to see the ball roll back.
Yeah.
And it was, I must admit, larger than I expected it to be.
Sure.
Because the hypocrisy out on that course this week from some of the players was shameless, even to some of their standards. Yeah. So look, I enjoyed it. I know it wasn't everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. Golf's subjective, and we love it for different reasons. But all the things I said on Thursday leading in terms of the unique nature of it and why that was going to excite me did absolutely. So I think it's certainly not the winner of the week. I probably overstated that earlier, but I enjoyed the test and the questions that it posed.
Yep. No, that's totally fair. What else you got? You got anything else that you want to raise or forever hold your peace?
I have nothing else. I think that neatly concludes the 123rd US Open. I will say I absolutely love the way in which there's plenty of criticism for the tour, but the way in which they've worked together with the majors to reshape major season. To have these kind of 4 or 5 week breaks. Like, as I said, we're back at Royal Liverpool for the Open Championship in 32 days. It was literally like 30 days ago. We were at Oak Hill. I love this stretch. It is truly the best 4 months through the middle part of the year. There's other great months, and of course we enjoy the Australian summer when we can physically go to events. But this is such a good time of year. Such a good time of year.
Agreed. Anyway, I'm going to put the Oregon theme song to play us out here because I'm going to milk this for all it's worth because it doesn't happen that often.
Can I very briefly, speaking of the best time of year, it would be remiss of us not to mention that in terms of major golf, we go again this weekend the KPMG Women's PGA Championship at Baltusrol. There are 8 Australians in the field. So just briefly wanted to make mention of Karis Davison, Hannah Green, Sarah Kemp, Grace Kim, Steph Kyriakou, Minjee Lee, Sue O, and Gabby Ruffles. We'll all tee it up at the KPMG Women's PGA this week at Baltusrol. We'll review those results next week. But major golf continues, Drews, on the women's side this weekend coming.
It does. Looking forward to it. Hopefully we see one of the girls up the top. That'd be unreal. I've got a good feeling about some of them. They are playing fantastic golf. Steph Kyriakou, Grace Kim, the young guns that are coming through. I think, courses like Baltusrol, it suits players who have a go. And I'll give you the hot tip, that group of Aussies has a red hot dip. So
won't die wondering.
We will have a go. So I wouldn't be at all surprised to see one of our Aussie ladies up the top of the leaderboard, which is going to be exciting. Baltusrol, get around it.
Great. Congratulations to Wyndham Clark. Commiserations to those who fell short. It's been a pleasure to have your company, Drudes. I'm going to go and take my Ricky Fowler emotional support water bottle and dream of what could have been. Thanks for your company, friends.